Hello everyone, and welcome to the DCS World Video News and Q&A for the 20th of September 2015. In today's video, I'm going to practice using unguided rockets and bombs in the L-39 over the NTTR map. Now for the first half of the video, I'm going to be practicing unguided rockets on a little section of the terrain between Dreamland and Yucca Flats. And then in the second part, I'm going to give my very best effort of trying to hit something with bombs on the western extreme of the red flag range, which I don't think you guys have seen before, and I think you will be interested to see what we have out there. Now when using unguided rockets, I'm going to first set up my weapons control panel and then also take off the safety from the weapon release trigger. Now for my tacks, I'm going to use a 20-degree dive, so I'm going to set the sight at 2.3 and the base at about 15 or so. Now using these conditions, if I fired about 500 meters radar altitude and a speed of about 560 kph, the rocket delivery should be pretty darn accurate. However, if the dive angle or the airspeed are a bit off, then the accuracy definitely will suffer. As you'll see in my passes though, many times I was actually a bit too shallow, around 15 degrees, and this led to a lot of inaccuracy. Now later on, I'm going to move on to some bombing practice, and in that case, I'm going to set the sight to around 10 with a base still around 15 or so. And in this case, I want to have my speed actually a bit lower, ideally around probably about 350 or so, and a release altitude a bit higher at about 800 meters. And as you'll see in the first pass, actually did pretty good, although my speed was definitely too high. But the second pass was pretty ugly, and I think a lot of that was due to the asymmetric loading on the wing, and that led to the nose kind of being all over the place. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So that's a summary of what you're going to be seeing in the video. So we'll move on now to the DCS World News. Now the two big news items, of course, are the pre-purchases for both the Nevada Test and Training Range map, as well as the M2000C by Razbam. So let's first talk a little bit about the NTTR release. If you take part in the pre-purchase, we actually have a couple nice benefits for you. The first is, if you pre-purchase between now and October 1st of this year, you'll actually get 2 free red flag campaigns, one for the F-15C and one for the A-10C. If, however, you purchase between October 1st and when the Open Alpha is released of the NTTR map, then you get to pick from one of the campaigns. But regardless of when you do a pre-purchase, you'll still get a 20% discount. Now, speaking of the pre-alpha, right now we're looking at releasing the pre-alpha to the public sometime in late November of 2015. After the Open Alpha is released and we're sure that we squashed any really big bugs, at that point we'll then go ahead and also release it on Steam. Now speaking of the NTTR map, we've also made some really nice improvements recently. Now earlier I talked about the trees in the urban areas having a collision model, but the forest not. But this has changed now. Now the forest trees have a collision as well. Now another big change in the map is actually the coloring of the map. Gone are the predominant grays, and we've much more highlighted the reds and the browns that are much more characteristic of this part of Nevada. And finally, we started adding animated approach lights to the airfields. Now the other big pre-purchase was the M2000C by Razbam, and this is going to be available as a pre-purchase with a 20% discount, and you can get it both at the DCS World eShop as well as the Razbam eShop. I've placed some links in the video notes. Now the DCS version is actually based on the Flight Sim 10 version, which was very highly regarded as just a really great product. And the DCS version will have a high fidelity external flight model, full cockpit systems modeling, and be in the same level as the A-10C and many of the other high level DCS products. In other news, the team is still working very hard on the L-39, fixing bugs and features, and as some of you have may notice, we've been adding a lot of new skins and of course, creating a lot of the open beta content. And lastly, and probably the biggest push for the team right now, of course, is getting 1.5 out the door. There's still several really big bugs, particularly with stability, that we're working on. and it's certainly still our hope to try to have this out before the end of September. So that's the DCS World News for today, and now we'll move on to the Q&A section, in which we're going to focus on the L39. The first question is, will there be a full-size manual at the release of the L39? Right now the manual is definitely very far along, but not complete. However, I think there's still a pretty good chance we'll have the full manual out at open beta release, if not too far after that. The second question is, are there any features to be left disabled or incomplete during the initial beta state, or are there any estimates of how long the L39 will be in beta? Probably the big three items I really don't foresee making in time for the open beta. One will be the ZA version. Second will be the cooperative multiplayer, and third, probably the overheating model for the engine. As for how long it will be in beta, well, it's really not an exact science. It really comes down to how fast we can identify and fix those bugs. And when we fix those bugs, it will be out of beta at that point. The third question is, will there be an anti-icing system for the L39? I believe it's actually working right now. I think the bigger question is, which will probably come later, is more visual indications of icing. Number 4, will there be an English cockpit? Actually, there is right now. We have both a Russian and English options for the cockpit. Number 5 is, will there be an engine overheating model? Absolutely. As mentioned earlier, it is one of those items, though, that probably will not make it into the open beta, but it's something we definitely have planned for the final product. Next, is there going to be interactive training missions for the L39? Absolutely. In fact, that was a big reason for some of the new AI systems that we're developing right now. But rather than have a separate campaign and training missions, we're going to have essentially what we call a training campaign. The next question is, given the L39 is a jet trainer, will the module trim acrobatic maneuvers such as hammerhead, split S, and tail slide? Yeah, that's the plan. And again, another big reason that we're developing this brand new AI system to give players examples of what they actually should be doing to make those maneuvers happen. The next question is, will L39C have a gun sight on release? Well, if you're watching the video, I think that answers your question right there. The next question is, what weapons will be compatible with the L39 upon public release? So it will have the R-35 air-to-air missile. It will have bombs like the Fab 100, P-50T, and the Illumination SAB 100. For rockets, it will have the S5KO, as well as a couple different fuel tanks, and of course, smoke pods. And the last question, not specifically an L39 question, but ask if a paint kit will be available upon the L39 release. And right now, we really don't have any plans to make a paint kit. We feel there's software off the shelf right now that can do a job 1,000 times better than we ever could, and there's really no need to reinvent the wheel there. And with that, this wraps up the news and Q&A for today's video. And I'll continue doing some bombing and rocket runs, and I will see you next time.